I am speaking to you. Look at me when I speak. This is completely unacceptable. Do you even care about your job? Answer me. Why are you doing this?
The chief surgeon told her to leave. He said she was a liability. He said she didn't belong in his hospital. He gave her
I need an
72
answer.
hours to clean
Why
out her
won't
locker
you speak
and
to
get
me?
out. She didn't fight. She didn't argue. She just packed her things like she'd been expecting it her whole life. And then she walked out into the hallway and straight into the one man she never thought she'd see again. A 4-star general who had spent 8 years looking for her. A general who thought she was dead. And the first words out of his mouth made the chief surgeon's face turn white. She had been invisible for 8 years. She had hidden every medal. She had buried every memory. And in one moment, in one hallway, in front of the man who had just fired her, everything came crashing back. Because the general didn't just recognize her. He saluted her. Right there in the middle of the hospital. And then he turned to the chief surgeon and asked him a question that changed everything. Dr. Sarah Chen had spent 14 years in the military. Not behind a desk. Not in a field hospital far from the front lines. She was on the ground. The first one in. The last one out. She had been through 14 combat deployments. She had served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. She had been shot at, blown up, and left behind more times than she could count. And every single time, she got back up. In 2017, she was part of a special operations unit operating in the mountains of Afghanistan. Her job was simple. Keep the men alive. No matter what. No matter how many bullets were flying. No matter how many of them were bleeding out on the ground. She was the one they called when everything went wrong. And everything went wrong more often than anyone wanted to admit. The helicopter went down at 2:17 in the morning. A routine extraction. A quick in and out. But the intel was wrong. The landing zone was compromised. The RPG hit the tail rotor and the helicopter spiraled into the valley below. 3 soldiers were trapped inside. The fuel tank was leaking. The fire was spreading. Sarah was 200 meters away when it happened. She didn't wait for orders. She didn't wait for backup. She ran straight into the wreckage. She pulled the first man out by his vest. He was unconscious but breathing. She dragged him 50 meters clear of the fire. She went back for the second man. His leg was pinned under the fuselage. She couldn't move him. She had to make a decision. Leave him and let him burn. Or stay and try to free him while the fire got closer. She stayed. She used a piece of wreckage to pry the metal off his leg. It took 4 minutes. It felt like 4 hours. She got him free. She dragged him clear. She went back for the third man. The third man was the pilot. He was still conscious. He was screaming. His lower body was crushed. She knew she couldn't save his legs. She knew she had to get him out before the fuel tank exploded. She reached through the flames, grabbed him by the harness, and pulled. She pulled until her arms felt like they were coming out of their sockets. She pulled until the heat singed her hair and melted part of her uniform. She got him out 13 seconds before the fuel tank went up. She was awarded the Silver Star. It was the highest commendation for medical service in the history of the United States Army. She never wore it. She never told anyone about it. When her contract ended, she quietly left the military. She took a job at a small hospital in San Diego. St. Mary's Memorial. She wanted to forget. She wanted to disappear into the ordinary rhythm of hospital life. She wanted to be invisible. And for 3 years, she almost succeeded. St. Mary's Memorial was the kind of hospital where everyone knew everyone. The nurses had their cliques. The doctors had their territories. And at the top of it all was Chief Surgeon Thomas Rayburn. Dr. Rayburn had been at St. Mary's for 18 years. He had built the trauma department from the ground up. He had trained half the surgeons in the building. He was respected, feared, and utterly convinced that he was the smartest person in every room. Rayburn didn't like Sarah Chen from the moment she arrived. She was too calm. Too competent. Too quiet. She didn't need him. She didn't ask for his approval. She didn't laugh at his jokes. She just showed up, did her job, and went home. The nurses noticed. They started going to her instead of him. They started trusting her judgment over his. They started calling her when things got complicated. Rayburn noticed too. He noticed every time a nurse bypassed him to ask Sarah for advice. He noticed every time a resident deferred to her opinion. He noticed every time someone in the ER looked to her instead of him. It ate at him. It gnawed at him. He started watching her. He started looking for mistakes. He found nothing. Sarah was never late. She never complained. She never asked for help she didn't need. She was always calm, always professional, always right. And that was the problem. Rayburn couldn't compete with that. He couldn't outwork her. He couldn't outshine her. The only thing he could do was outrank her. So he waited. Then came the day that changed everything. A school bus collision on Interstate 5. A semi-truck ran a red light and plowed into the bus at 60 miles an hour. 23 children. 6 adults. Critical injuries. Multiple amputations. Internal bleeding. Traumatic brain injuries. The ER was overwhelmed. The trauma teams were stretched thin. Rayburn was in surgery when the first wave of patients arrived. Sarah walked into the middle of it without being asked. She didn't wait for orders. She didn't wait for permission. She just started working. A 9-year-old boy with a punctured lung. She intubated him in under 60 seconds. A 12-year-old girl with a ruptured spleen. She placed the ultrasound probe and diagnosed the bleed before the attending physician even finished his assessment. A 7-year-old boy with a shattered pelvis. She directed the trauma team through a complex stabilization procedure. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't panic. She just moved through the chaos like she had been born in it. The ER started to shift. The nurses started looking to her. The residents started following her lead. People who had been running in circles started moving with purpose. She was directing 4 different trauma teams simultaneously. She was making split-second decisions that would determine whether these children lived or died. And she was right every single time. By the time Rayburn came out of surgery, the crisis was over. 23 children had been stabilized. All of them were alive. Rayburn walked into the ER expecting to be congratulated. Expecting to be praised. Expecting to be celebrated as the leader who had saved the day. Instead, he found a room full of people gathered around Sarah Chen. They were thanking her. They were shaking her hand. They were asking her for advice on the next steps. Rayburn stood in the doorway and watched. And something inside him snapped. Rayburn called her into his office that night. It was late. The hospital was quiet. He sat behind his desk with his arms crossed. He didn't ask her to sit down. He didn't offer her a chair. He just looked at her with cold, hard eyes and told her she was done. He said she was a liability. He said she didn't follow protocol. He said she undermined his authority in front of the entire trauma team. He said she was insubordinate and disruptive and a danger to the hospital's reputation. He said he had documented everything. He said he had spoken to HR. He said she had 72 hours to clean out her locker and get out of his hospital. Sarah didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't defend herself. She just stood there with her hands at her sides and listened. She had heard worse things before. She had been called worse names before. She had been left for dead before. She didn't say anything. She just turned around and walked out of his office. She went to her locker. She packed her things. She didn't look at the nurses who watched her. She didn't explain herself. She didn't ask for help. She just packed her bag and walked out. And then she walked down the hallway toward the exit. The hallway where General Marcus Webb was waiting for her. General Marcus Webb had been in San Diego for a different reason. A military conference. A keynote speech. He wasn't supposed to be on that floor. He wasn't supposed to be in that building at all. But he had seen a name on a roster. A name he hadn't heard in 8 years. A name he had been told was lost. He had been looking for her for 8 years. He had searched every database. He had called every contact. He had followed every lead that went nowhere. And then he found her. She was working at a small hospital in San Diego. She was using her married name. She had hidden herself so completely that even the military couldn't find her. He walked into St. Mary's Memorial on a Tuesday afternoon. He asked the front desk where she was. They said she was on the 3rd floor. He took the stairs. He walked down the hallway. And there she was. She had her bag in her hand. She looked tired. She looked broken. She looked like she had been carrying the weight of the world for 8 years and was about to drop it. General Webb walked up to her. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He just looked at her face and said her name. Sarah looked up at him. She recognized him instantly. She had saved his men. She had pulled them from the wreckage. She had kept them alive until the medevac arrived. She had been the last face they saw before they lost consciousness. She had been the reason they came home. He saluted her. Right there in the middle of the hospital hallway. A full military salute. Hand to brow. Back straight. Eyes forward. He held it for a long moment. And then he said the words he had been waiting 8 years to say. He said thank you. He said my men came home because of you. He said I've been looking for you. He said I thought you were dead. Sarah's face didn't change. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. But something in her posture shifted. Something that had been tight for 8 years started to loosen. She took a breath. She told him that she wasn't in the military anymore. She told him she was leaving this hospital. She told him she had been fired. General Webb looked at her bag. He looked at her face. He looked at the name on her locker. And then he asked her a question that made the entire hallway go quiet. He asked her who fired her. Rayburn was still in his office. He was still sitting behind his desk. He was still congratulating himself on getting rid of the problem. And then his door opened. General Marcus Webb walked in. He didn't knock. He didn't ask for permission. He just walked in. Rayburn stood up. He recognized the uniform. He recognized the stars. He knew exactly who was standing in front of him. And he knew it wasn't going to be good. General Webb walked up to the desk. He put his hands on the wood. He leaned forward. He stared into Rayburn's eyes. He asked him what he had said to Sarah. Rayburn started to explain. He started to justify. He started to defend himself. He said she was disruptive. He said she didn't follow protocol. He said she was a liability. He said she had undermined his authority. He said she wasn't a real doctor. General Webb listened to everything. He didn't interrupt. He just let Rayburn dig his own grave. And then he spoke. He told Rayburn who Sarah really was. He told him she had a silver star. He told him she had 14 combat deployments. He told him she had personally pulled 3 men from a burning helicopter and saved 14 others from certain death. He told him she had ignored orders and walked into a kill zone to get her men out. He told him she had more courage in her little finger than Rayburn had in his entire career. He said she saved soldiers he sent into a war zone. She saved his men. She saved his brothers. And she did it without complaint. Without recognition. Without anyone ever knowing what she had done. He said she was the best medic he had ever served with. And then he asked Rayburn if he knew what it felt like to fail someone like that. Rayburn didn't answer. He couldn't. He was pale. He was sweating. He was shaking. He had made a terrible mistake. He knew it. General Webb wasn't done. He said he was going to fix this. He said he was going to have the hospital board review Rayburn's conduct. He said he was going to have the medical board investigate every single decision Rayburn had made in the last 3 years. He said he was going to make sure that Sarah got everything she deserved. And then he said one more thing. He leaned in close and told Rayburn that if he ever spoke to Sarah again, he would personally destroy his career. General Webb walked out of Rayburn's office. He walked back to Sarah. She was still standing in the hallway. She had watched the whole thing through the glass window in Rayburn's door. She had seen everything. General Webb walked up to her. He looked at her bag. He asked her where she was going. She said she didn't know. He told her he had a position for her. Senior medical advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She would have a desk. She would have a uniform. She would have respect. She would never have to explain herself to anyone again. Sarah didn't go back to St. Mary's. She didn't want to. She accepted the general's offer. She put her uniform back on. She pinned her silver star on her chest. She walked into the Pentagon and took her place among the highest military leaders in the country. She spent the next decade making sure that the next woman with a quiet voice and a heavy burden never had to carry it alone. The general stayed in touch. He invited her to reunions. He introduced her to the men she had saved. They hugged her. They thanked her. They told her what they had done with their lives. One became a surgeon. One became a teacher. One became a father. All of them came home because of her. All of them were alive because she had refused to leave them behind. And she never forgot what that felt like. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. She never forgot what it felt like to be underestimated. She never forgot what it felt like to be told she didn't belong. And she spent the rest of her life making sure no one else ever felt that way again. She became a mentor. A teacher. A leader. She became the woman that everyone wanted to work for. She became the general's successor. She became the first woman to hold her position. And she never once forgot where she came from. She came from a small hospital in San Diego. She came from a hallway where a general found her. She came from a moment when the world told her she was nothing and someone told her she was everything. She came from the place where heroes are made. Not on battlefields. Not in war rooms. But in the quiet moments when someone sees you for who you really are. And refuses to let you disappear. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been told you didn't belong? Have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who refused to see you? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, stories about the people who quietly save the world, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. And we'll see you in the next one.